You ready?
Yep.
Call this meeting to order. My name is Joe McGivern, Chair of the Holyoke City Council's Finance Committee. Members present to my right in chambers, Councilor Tallman. Online, we have Councilor Will Plello, and that's the three members we have present. Councilor Anderson Burgos is on his way back from Boston, and Councilor Jourdain should be joining us shortly.
Councilor Jourdain is here, Mr.
Councilor
Chairman.
Jourdain is here. I apologize, Kevin. Gonna have to re-switch this image here. We're also joined by Councilor Bacon.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to take a roll call vote that for the purposes of this meeting would be applicable to all motions to remove an item from the table, place items on the table, package items, or suspend the rules unless there is an objection.
And I'll second that.
Motion.
And Councilor Jourdain seconded it. For the purposes of a hybrid Zoom, meaning some of us are here and some of us are not, which is fine, that motion allows us to not have to take roll calls on smaller type motions themselves, but on final motions to recommend to the City Council, we will take a roll call vote. We are live. We are live on the Cable Access Network, Channel 15. We are being streamed. We are Zoom being recorded. And with that, we're going to get to item number one.
Make a motion to take item number one off the table for discussion.
Second.
Motion made second to take item one off the table for discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Introduced under my name for the mayor, that in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, the City Council hereby accepts the provisions of the fiscal 23 Regional Economic Development Organization Redo Project, the ARTery Project, which is $28,500 no match, and that we authorize the establishment of a fund and or other method appropriate for the accounting of the receipts and expenditures of all resources associated with the administration of said grants. This is off the table for discussion. Aaron Vega from OPED is with us this evening. Aaron, welcome.
Thank you.
Would you like to walk us through this?
Absolutely. Good to see you, councilors, and thank you for taking this up. This is actually a second part, if you will, of an original grant that you already approved for the same purpose from the same source. If you recall last year with the rapid recovery plan that we worked on and looking at initiatives to bring back downtown, one of the initiatives was to create a bricks and mortar vendor space, and hence we have created the ARTery in conjunction with the building owner and in conjunction with the print shop. And so we now have the ARTery open 4 days a week with over 70 vendors doing events and getting towards being self-sustained. A year ago when we first applied, we asked for $80,000 to cover 1 year of operations. We got $30,000. And then they came back and they had additional funding, so we just resubmitted for a second phase, and they gave us another almost $30,000. So didn't quite get to our original ask, but we do believe that with this funding and getting us through the next 6 months, paying the rent and the utilities and the staffing and a little bit more towards marketing, that the ARTery will become self-sustaining. So that'll be a full year covered under the grant, and then they'll become self-sustaining, predominantly not just through the vendors, but predominantly through the things like their splatter room, the renting of the spaces, and the art shows that they're having there. So they've been having a great impact. They've been a great partner for us. And again, this is a no-match grant that will allow us to keep doing the work of the ARTery and get them to a position hopefully in the beginning of the new year where they are self-sustaining.
Aaron, does the ARTery stay at one location?
Yes, it's a bricks and mortar spot for one location. That way the vendors there can have their products there. They don't have to come. It's staffed by someone who staffs it. The artists get checks every month if they sell stuff. It's free for artists to bring their stuff there. And then it's a 70-30 split, which again is in favor compared to most galleries, much more in favor of the artists. Obviously, what's nice about this is that the print shop and Jeff Bianchini, which most of you know, does operate a lot of the other events in the city, and especially the vendors, whether it's Pride, Celebrate Holyoke, Petronalis Festival, etc. He's been a good contact, so we're able to then directly contact these 70 artists when there's other events in the city to have other opportunities for them. So they have their stuff permanently at the ARTery bricks and mortar, but obviously then they're able to sort of have information on other events that are coming up where they have ability to be vendors.
And for anybody listening, how would they find the Artery?
The Artery, you can go online on social media. You can look up the Artery. They have a great website, and right there, it's again, it's a free application for any artist to have their stuff there. If you've been there, they have paintings up to $500, $700, and they have bracelets at $2. Right? They've got clothing, they've got candles, they've got homemade woodwork, they've got homemade metal work. All local artists in the surrounding area, and it's been doing very well so far. Obviously, you know, times like Christmas and holidays, they do better. It's, again, trying to get that momentum for people to come back down. And, you know, when they're visiting Crave or the Colombian restaurant or any of these restaurants are coming down here, we're hoping that they do a little bit of shopping as well. So we're making those connections as well.
Nice, very nice. Councilor Tomlin.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Thanks for explaining this project, and it seems like it's very beneficial for this area. What is the actual address of the Artery? Is it down here on High Street, or is it
right across the street? It's right next to Crave.
Oh, it's right next to Crave. Okay.
So 295 is. Yeah, so
Okay,
286. 286 comes to mind. It's right next to Crave, the nail salon, and the I'm not sure if they're still there, but the Marquis Solomon office on the ground floor. So it's right there.
Okay, and you said the hours were there 4 days? Are there certain hours?
Yeah, there's certain hours. It's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I want to say noon to 6-ish comes to mind, but I can double check that for sure.
Okay.
So, and they do stay open, you know, when we do have events, you know, coming up this fall, and I mean the spring and fall, where there's events on High Street, they'll stay open longer. They're able to, you know, so if there's something else going on in the city, they'll manage and will be open different hours if we have something else going on.
Okay, and you stated
they've also been our key retail spot right now for all the 150th merchandise. So the T-shirts, the hats, the buttons, and the pins
and all that.
Right, so they've been our vendor for that.
And you stated is this a second grant from them at about the same amount?
Yeah, about the same amount, exactly. Yep.
Okay, and you stated that probably after this fall it'll be hopefully self-supporting, or
yeah, we have other projects to get grants for, so that we will not be, you know, this was, as many things in my office, it's we give the spark, we give the start,
the jump,
and then we try to, you know, like a bird, we push them off the nest. So the hope is, and again, I think it's been the splatter room and the renting of the space for artists to have their art shows and their galleries, etc., have been bringing in revenue that stays with the Artery.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We are joined by Councilor Israel Rivera, and Councilor Rivera has his hand up.
No, I just wanted to make a couple comments on the Artery. It's an awesome space. I've been there a couple times. The splattery room is pretty cool. I haven't done it yet, but I've been planning to take my 3-year-old and my 1-year-old there to let them just throw paint everywhere.
Paint, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, and then one of my former teachers and longtime Holyoker, Mrs. Laura Barrett, hosted one of her showings there, and it's a great experience for her and for the community overall. I have to say that that space is a pretty cool space, and the direction that we're heading, like business-wise, because I'm noticing a lot of pop-up shops and stuff like that, this kind of complements that, or at least allows for it in a way where it's in one housed area. And I think in the future we got to work on how we can help these pop-up things continue to thrive and grow. But that's just all I wanted to say with regards to that. It's a great project.
Thank you. And just real quick, 100%, I think to Councilor McGivern's point earlier, when we're looking, especially through the work that Kevin Maforte is doing with the TDI on High Street, when we talk about utilizing or reactivating some of these vacant spaces for pop-ups, again, we have 70 artists ready to bring their stuff there. Right, a lot of these artists also supported last year the Greek Orthodox Church event that they had. So again, these vendors are able to make more contacts and absolutely be able to utilize some of these vacant spaces and pop-ups.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
The last thing I'll say is the splatter room will be a great city council get-together night too. It's a very fun experience to throw some paint on the canvas and have some fun. Team building.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the $28,500 no match grant for the Artery Project.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded that we recommend approval, adoption of this grant. And with that in mind, if there's no further discussion, a roll call vote. Councilor Tallman?
Yes.
Councilor Jordan?
Yes.
Councilor Puelo?
Yes.
Counselor McGivern, yes. We have an adoption of 401, and that will be recommended to the full city council next Tuesday. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you very much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Have a good evening.
Item 2.
Motion to take item number 2 off the table for discussion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to take item 2 off the table for discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. I introduce under my name that a transfer of $61,345 from vacation buyback be allowed into overtime, $60,000, HAZMAT overtime, $1,345, for the total of $61,345. We've taken this off the table for discussion. With us, we have our fire chief, Kadowitz, joined on Zoom. Chief, welcome. It's a two-part question. Could you tell us briefly why there's a surplus in vacation buyback, and then just go over the overtime for us?
The surplus, we talked about it when I came in the last time for overtime. We just didn't have the people do the buyback this year. They can adjust it throughout the year up to 50%, so they can start at a certain amount and they can adjust it back 50% of what they first committed to selling back. So we just have more people using vacation time instead of doing the buyback for vacation time.
It's amazing when COVID is, well, we won't say over, but, you know, certainly not what it was 2 years ago, where people can now take advantage of vacation time.
Exactly.
And you want to use this for overtime? Can you just go through the two overtimes?
The one overtime is HAZMAT overtime. What happened was the person who was on the HAZMAT team before was part of our office staff. They've since promoted out of the office staff. So when they do drills and stuff, they get paid overtime when they do them. That money is actually reimbursable through the state. It comes back to us and goes back into, I believe, the general fund after we get a reimbursement.
Okay.
And then the other 60,000 is what we're looking for to kind of get us through the rest of the year. We've actually been trending very well over the past 7 pay periods. You know, we had a little bit of a spike for the St. Patrick's Day holiday. We have to hire extra people for the different events, but we've had over the past 7 pay periods, it's been an $8,000 a pay period average for overtime, which has been definitely going in the right direction from where it was earlier. But we did have 7 individuals on March 23rd start the fire academy, and they'll be finishing up at the beginning of June. So we're gonna have to fill that gap while they're gone, and also gives us a little extra money in case we have any major incidents.
So when it comes to firefighters, how many are you down?
Right now, we're fully staffed. It's just we're down 7 because they're at the fire academy.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant. So 7, when the 7 come back from the academy, you're fully staffed.
Yes, we'll have 2 more that need to go to the academy, but that's a much easier amount to manage.
Is there any discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer.
Second.
Motion
Second.
made and second that we approve the transfer. If there's no further discussion, roll call vote. Counselor Tallman?
Yes.
Counselor Jordan?
Yes.
Counselor Puelo?
Yes.
Counselor McGivern, yes. Okay, so that'll be approved and recommended to the next city council meeting on Tuesday with a 401 vote. Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you, counselors. We appreciate your support.
Thank you, Chief.
Right, the next
Want to do 2?
3 to 4 together.
Make a motion to suspend the rules and take items 3 and 4 together as a package.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to take up items 3 and 4 as a package. All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. The transfer is introduced under my name, coming from sick buyback, $125,000 to patrolman's salary line item, $125,000. That's connected to item number 4, which is a settlement agreement between the City of Holyoke and the International Brotherhood of Police Officers, known as Local number 388. These are both off the table for discussion. Traditionally, we have our law departments represented by Mayor Bissonette, I guess I could say. Attorney Bissonette, welcome. We have Chief Pratt with us. Is there a member of the union, Russ
Russ
Dupree was
Dupree's
what,
here.
Russ Dupree, I'm sorry, Russ, I can see you now.
Manny
Manny Rivera is with us. So traditionally, I think it's the best to start with the law department, and I apologize, but I thought we had the mayor with we have the mayor with us. We start with the law department just to run down the, this MOU, I guess is what it is, or MOA. And then we'll get into the financial transfer and everything, but we want to hear from the law department, the union, the mayor, and anybody who wishes to inform us how good this contract is.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Councilor Jennings.
when the time is right, I had one process question I wanted to ask about relative to what we've been provided as supporting documents.
Are you looking for the red line docket?
Yeah, other contract.
Yes, you're a mind reader too, among your
I was
many
going to ask
skills.
about that too. Yeah.
All right.
And
No, well,
because as you'll notice, we only received a one-page, we don't have the before and the after exactly. So we really would appreciate that red line. I believe that was the request. So we can have the whole agreement and see the changes. That would be really appreciated.
okay, that will be
So-
that'll be talked about. Mike, you or Russ going to lead us through this?
I'm going to defer to Attorney Dupre on this. He was involved in the final negotiations, and I think he can best represent the facts of the agreement.
Thank you. Russ, welcome.
Sure. Hello. And I can also address, so there is a red line version of the entire contract. I'm not sure why it didn't make its way to you, but that document has been prepared. So I'll talk to the law department about that and make sure it gets to you. But
Thank
there
you.
is a red line track contract ready to go. As far as the settlement that I believe you have in front of you, the first couple items are just fixing typos in the contract. So the first substantive item is number 3. We added Juneteenth, which has been added to all the contracts based on the state law change. And in this particular group, they're getting a one-time bonus for the Juneteenth that passed on 6/20/22. That's something all the other groups received, but this group did not at the time. Number 4 is the same sick leave change that we made with the other contract that came before you. So we're reducing the maximum number of sick days that can be bought back upon retirement. So for employees hired January 1, 2023 or later, that cap would be 150 days. That is actually a pretty major change for the long-term, financial future of the city. And we're trying to make that change with every group as we go along. Number 5, non-discrimination. We're just adding a number of protected categories that happen to be missing from the contract. We agreed to a 3-year deal. The wages, as you see in front of you, were 3% for the first year, 2.5% the second year. In the second year, we also added a new step 6, which is 1.5% greater than step 5. And that was based on the union and the city. When we looked at the comps in the area and through mediation, it was determined that where we were somewhat low was at the top of your scale. And so that was the compromise, was to add that kind of like a half step at the top of the scale. And then in the third year, we agreed to 2.5%. The last item, which the chief could speak to in more detail, but is a major change for us as well, is that we would not have any more than 3 officers off at any one time on time owed, which is basically like comp time, is what most places call it. And that is really a scheduling and overtime benefit to us. Chief Pratt, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit more, but that was the 2 items that we really wanted to change were the sick leave buyback and this particular item, both of which are in the agreement. I think ultimately it's a fair agreement for both sides because we addressed the salary schedule at the top of the scale in particular. So I think it's a fair deal for the union and the city.
Russ, can you translate the new step 6 in July 1st, 2023, what that turns into dollars?
Chief, I don't have the financials with me here. I'm actually waiting to be pulled into another meeting. But I think the chief is Tanya present?
Tanya is present.
I think this is the one they handed off to.
Okay, she might have the calculation.
There you go. This is the one from tonight?
Are you looking for number 7 you want to know? You want to know the wage changes?
Well, it reads, add the new step 6, into this phase, and
So-
1.5% above the current step 5. So is it a 1.5% increase, or is it a larger increase?
So it's 2.5, and then if you're a step 5 and you go to a step 6, which I would assume all the 5s will be eligible to be a step 6. Is that correct, Russ?
Yeah, so it's less than a 1.5% cost because not everybody's at that step.
So it's
But
6.
I just don't know the exact number. 'Cause I'm not sure how many people are at step 5 off the top of my head.
So it comes up to 66,524
Yeah.
with the education plans and the in-service training and longevity that are included in their salary.
Okay, thank you. Okay, a question from Counselor Tallman, and then Manny. Manny, did you want to speak?
He's on mute.
Or
Hello?
Chief Pratt?
Oh, there he is. Manny's on now.
Yeah, I'm on. So if you need some clarification, I'd be more than happy to try to help.
No, well, we may have questions, but as we go, I'd just like to make sure that someone represents the union. Chief Pratt's here, obviously, to represent the department with the mayor.
Sure.
Just a round table, if you have anything to say. If not, there might be some questions. Chief,
Okay, now,
Chief, did you want to add anything?
Not really. I could speak on, what Russ had mentioned about the timeout. I felt that was a real significant negotiation. It was actually mentioned in the assessment or the audit that we needed to work on that, and the union did come to the table on that, which was great. And I think it will definitely help us control overtime going forward.
I've always wondered why we didn't have some type of policy for that. It had a hand, tie your hands when it came to a lot of officers, and probably for good reasons, requesting time off and forcing the overtime hand. But I think it's a great compromise and a great agreement.
It was long overdue, and I do credit both sides recognizing that and continuing to work together to try to come to an agreement on that. And I think we came up with a good agreement.
Okay, Councilor Tallman.
Yeah, thank you. Chief, on that item number 8, I have 2 questions for you, but on that one, what is the, since we don't have the red line contract, what is the number of officers now that can be off at one time with time owed? You changed it to 3, so is it like 5, 6?
Well, before that, yeah, it was pretty much unlimited. And it was, for years, a constant struggle to try to
Keep it.
to make that whole when the officers request the time off. So this is definitely a benefit to us, the benefit to both sides really, and it was great that both sides recognized it. I think it was highlighted as well in the assessment, and so it's another part of the assessment that we were sort of working on when they came, but they caught it too and highlighted it, and I'm glad that we're taking steps to rectify it.
Yeah, thank you on that one, Chief. It seems like it's a big benefit, like to all parties here, especially the city, and possibly your scheduling officers and hopefully cutting down a bit on the overtime since you don't have to replace that many. On item number 4, what is the amount right now on the cap It'll change for new hires after January of this year, but what is it right now? Is it unlimited or, it's
Right
got
now,
150, yeah.
It's 250 right now, and they dropped that to 150. So that was another big, negotiation that I thought was clearly going long term is going to be beneficial.
Yeah, and I understand that's beneficial, but that probably won't be till you get these new hires get ready to retire. Could be 20, 25 years, all right? I mean, anybody that's on right now still gets the 250 if they have
Correct.
it. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor Israel Rivera?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman McGivern. My questions more or less are around, I'm a new counselor. This is probably the first time I go through this process. So for me, it's about, I guess, explaining it in a way where, for myself, for other new counselors, and as well as people that are watching in the public right now, just to like see, so I see 3%, 2.5, then the added step 6. I'm assuming this is a pay scale schedule, right? And then I'm assuming that these are for new officers that are coming on, and this will be as they go on. These are the raises, I would say, right? Mm-hmm. And this is just me coming off the top of my head of my own experience and wherever I'm at. But like, not everyone will be able to do that if they're watching. So it doesn't have to be done in this meeting or whatever. But like in the future, if maybe I could set up a meeting with the chief or some people just to try to get a better understanding of how this is put together. So that way, when they're speaking about it in a meeting and when we go to full council, a lot of us actually are familiar with the language, I would say, right? For you guys have the privilege of being around in the council for a long time. And over time, you learn things. For me, I'm picking it up as I go. And I would like to be able to know the ins and outs as much as I can. Right now, at face value, it looks pretty simple, but just in case there's more underlying features, I would probably like to have a better understanding. So whomever can clarify any of the things for me on a side note, because I don't want to take a long time in this meeting, I'll feel free to let me know or I'll reach out, whichever one. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Councilor. Online, Councilor Bacon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a general question because we don't have the whole contract to look at. And it's really just a basic process question. Whoever's best to answer it. I'm just wondering how it works when people are called for overtime, how the reserve officers might fit in, and if that's addressed specifically in the contract, and how that works generally.
I can probably answer most of that.
Chief Pratt?
It is addressed in the full contract, different ways we can utilize reserve officers based on different factors. We can hire the reserve officers ahead of time, which is what we generally do, and they can be also utilized to backfill in certain circumstances based on time of year and how many, things like that. But it's in the contract. When you get the full contract, you can read the different intricacies there.
Okay. And do you feel that it's been effective to help with the overtime?
Reserve officers?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions I wanted to ask. First thing I wanted to ask about was the sick leave change, and I wanted to compare it to what we just did for the superior officers. I was under the impression for the superior officers, it took effect immediately, not for new employees. Is that a difference here for these? Russ, you want to address?
No, it didn't take effect immediately. It is different language from the superior officers, however. Chief, do you recall exactly what we did with the superior officers? I think it was 40 or 60% of 200 days for a total of 120. That sound right to you?
That's correct,
Yeah.
yep.
So what happened is we settled, we had already made a proposal with patrol at the 150-day number, and then we went back and forth with patrol, and actually we had some confusion about it in mediation, but ultimately we ended up at 150 days with this group. The other one is a total of 200, but you get paid out for 60% of those days for a total of 120. But they both start for new employees, not for current employees. That's potentially something we could try to change in the future, but that would be a much more costly change because we'd have to offset what some of the people are taking out the door now.
Chief, can you confirm that it was only for new superior officers?
Yeah, that's definitely it for new hires, new superior officers and new patrol officers too, as well.
So we won't see the benefit of that for maybe many decades then, potentially.
Correct.
Okay. So when you're valuing everything else, like how did you consider that financially then? You know, like something that's a benefit 20 or 25 years from now versus now, like how did you do that with your math? It was just, well, what are
you asking me?
Yeah, I mean, was there some sort of actuarial analysis done, or like how did you, like what's the value of that? I mean, it's obviously a good thing that we put this cap in, but if it's not, I mean, when you discount it for 20 or 25 years, I mean, what's the present value of that? Was there any analysis done on that?
So what we did was we looked at what the current outflow is each year. Tanya, I think it was, gave us what it was costing on average over the last few years, which is a huge number. So you're right, there's no immediate savings, but someday it'll be a huge savings. I think number 8, the time owed, was really the immediate change that we made that helps on the overtime side and scheduling in general.
So I guess my question is, did you give extra on the rate increases in order to pay for the sick leave change, or was that something that we just got and we probably would have given the same increases?
I don't know if it would have been exactly the same. I mean, we didn't value that change as being worth a huge amount of money because it was so far out in the future, which we told the union at the time. However, there is value to that. I mean, it's something that you have to make this change at some point. I mean, the city pays way too much when people retire currently. So this is a step in that direction. I mean, I think the next contract round, we've talked about, you know, if we want to make a bigger change to this item, what do we do on the salary schedule? And I think if you make it for current employees, then yes, you would be trading off, wage increases to get rid of the benefit right now. We didn't really do that with this contract. These raises were more based on the marketplace and also trying to make the time owed change. But the sick leave, I mean, it is a good change, even though it happens so far in the future. It's still worth something, but I wouldn't give like 2% for it. You know, I mean, it's not worth that.
Right. That's it. Yeah. Okay. I wanted to understand the mathematics on that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm strongly in favor of the change. The only thing I would say that I was a little concerned about with it is you've got 150, by not having these the same for the superiors and the patrolmen, I just feel like we get into this comparison, and we've often had this of, well, you know, I went backwards when I became a superior officer, or, you know, whether it's the educational incentive or sick leave, and I get concerned that, you know, there'll be an appetite to go to the 150 for the superiors in the future, because if somebody gets promoted, someone's going to make the argument, that they're getting reduced potentially. The level of uniformity that we can put on some of these policies would be helpful to the extent you can in the future. I know.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And actually, we thought that both unions actually wanted them to be uniform, so we made that proposal. But I think there was confusion between the union and us and the mediator, and so it came across the wrong way. We were really just trying to match everything up. But yes, we totally agree it should be the same. And I think the next contract, that's something all the parties will have to talk about.
Right. Okay. What was the value of what was the cost to the city of adding the extra holiday, if you know?
Each day is approximately 0.5%. So, you know, that's roughly the cost.
All right. So
I mean, that was driven by the state, though. There wasn't too much you could do about that, really.
Agreed. But I am wondering if that factored into, you know, what we gave out for the wage increase piece. Now, I'm reading a spreadsheet that perhaps came from the auditor, and it says that the additional for fiscal 23, which is the current fiscal year, it appears it's $195,000 for this year's impact. Does that include the educational, the holiday cost as well?
That does not include an additional holiday cost because it would just be a paid day. So I did not add that in. Sorry about that.
Okay. So if 3% is 195,000, I'll have to do my, 0.5% would be 1/6 of that, then, I think, based on what Russ said. So let's see here, 195 divided by 6. So that's about 33,000. Okay, I mean, just as a thumbnail. All right, I'm just trying to run my margin notes here. So we've got 195,000 for the pay raise for this year. We have 33,000 for the holiday, so that gets us to about 228. And on the flip side, we're saving money on the time off, time owed, section 8. Do we have a number as to how much that saves us? I don't know if anybody's done an analysis by capping it from unlimited to 3 people in a day. Do we have a number as to what the financial impact of that is?
Chief Brad, I don't think that ever got exactly calculated. Am I correct about that?
That's correct.
You did look, however, at how often it was happening. I mean, it was a kind of a fairly frequent occurrence. So there is a fair amount of overtime tied to this when we were letting it go beyond 3, from what I recall.
Correct, and I'll add that, you know, it's sort of a 2-part thing. As you're aware, we currently have, you know, new officers that just came on, and we have 10 that are in the police academy that just started. So when they come out, this is where we'll really see the impact, because then the numbers will be up, less people off, less overtime. So that I really see the full impact of this. Starting like in the fall when they get out of the academy. We're going to start to see a little of it with the officers that are currently in training that will hit the street fairly soon. And then when that second group of 10 comes out, and probably for the first time in well over a decade, we'll be at 94 officers. and when they're out and on their own, we're going to really see the impacts of this. And with the limiting of the time off, we're going to be able to really curb that overtime number, I believe.
Yeah, there's a benefit to the patrolmen too, because we don't have to hold people over as much. So
Correct.
this one kind of has a benefit on both sides, really.
Correct.
Right, I'm certainly not in disagreement. The question is, I'm looking for a number. You know, with all due respect, these things, you know, need to be assigned a financial analysis, right?
I think it's hard to assign a number yet. Like I said, without those numbers out of the academy and seeing the impact of both together, it's really hard. You'll probably be able to get a number probably when we're here next year. Once the people have been out, we've been instituted this time owed policy, then you're going to see the impact in the overtime. And, you know, to put a number on it today, it's almost impossible to do.
Well, I think we need to give you some support then, Chief, because I don't think it's impossible. I think what you need to do
maybe
is...
impossible for me. I don't know. Maybe there's
maybe. Understood. Understood. Yeah. We're not expecting you to be an actuary here, but at the same level, maybe we need to be giving you this type of support, and we're not. What I'm suggesting is, I think perhaps if I were in your shoes and I had to run an analysis on this, I would look at the number of days, because I believe the rule here is that a total of 3 officers on time owed at any one time. I'm assuming you mean that as on a particular day or a particular shift. Does that mean a shift, or does that mean a day, Chief?
A shift.
A shift, okay. So you'd have to go back, say, over the last 2 years and see how many times that occurred, right? And what were the number of officers greater than 3 at any given at any given time, and then see, would those people have had other time, right? You'd have to see what was the financial cost to the city of the shifts exceeding 3 on any given shift in the prior 2 years. And then from there, you know, you would be able to see that they would be required to use other time, right? It would either they'd have to use their regular vacation leave or some other form of leave instead of time owed, right? But then the flip side of that, of course, that I think we need to consider is, if we don't allow them to use the time owed, it isn't that they're earning less time owed, they're just not able to use it with the same level of frequency, and therefore it's creating an unfunded liability. And how is that being recorded on the books, right? So is it really a savings? You know, maybe. It's just a question of, I'd like to know how many times this is actually occurring. And from there, you could see, you know, how many shifts of time owed you're saving in a year. And then the question is, you know, what's that valued at? And then the other question is, well, is it that we have to pay them that same amount of time, but some other way? But that might be okay, because we're saving the overtime in the present, right? We're not creating more overtime. But this language says additional officers may be granted time off so long as the department can fill additional spots with overtime or special officers. So what does that mean? That if you can get more people to come in for overtime, then you can allow to exceed the 3? Is that it? But if you can't get people to come in for overtime, then you can't go over 3.
Correct.
So how does that drive down overtime? So for example, say there's 5 people that want to take time off, but you can only allow 3. So now 2 other people just call it overtime, and then they get the time owed on another day. I'm just trying to see, how does that reduce overtime? It seems like it's converting time owed to overtime.
No, that's not it at all. What it
Okay.
basically is that, all right, so the rule is 3, and what our struggle here is in the police department is that we cannot, for lack of a better way of saying it, people do not want to work extra.
Okay.
And they certainly don't want to be held, at the last minute. And this is a little more complicated in the sense that the way the time owed rule was before, it was very difficult for us to schedule the time owed. Now, when you're worried about people that are going to have time owed, or they'll just be accumulating more time owed and won't be able to use it, this is actually going to work in that favor. It's going to allow us to schedule it further out. People will be able to put in for the time owed, further out than they were, and it's going to give us more time to ensure that we have the proper manning, which with the increases we will. It'll allow them to utilize their time owed a little more. They'll be able to look at their whole calendar. You know what I mean? Like look ahead and then be able to plan better to use that time so that they're not just accumulating time that they can't use. We were in situations where officers were sometimes not being able to use their time owed, but now with this being in place, I think it's going to make it much smoother and much easier to use. As far as what you're talking about, the above and beyond thing, it's, I think it's more of that's sort of a catch-all for, there are just days that happen here at the police department. I'll use an example of, say, an officer on a shift is having a wedding, and all the people that he works with on that shift want to go to the wedding, and and this will allow us to still hire extra people. A lot of times in those cases, officers are willing to step up and help out. The ones that aren't on the shift or that might not be going to the wedding, so that we can go above and beyond for those type of days. I think that's probably the best example of when that happens. But generally, on a regular day-to-day, there's usually no extra. We have a book that people sign if they want to work overtime. It's usually empty these days. Nobody is really signing up in big numbers, unlike, say, the past. So I think that this negotiation was really big for kind of controlling this time owed thing that we've been dealing with for, my whole career. So I think it's definitely a step in the right direction, and it's something that can be continued to be looked at. I think the key to it is the numbers going up. There'll be more people on shift with less people having the ability to take it off, which is going to really put controls on that overtime.
And Chief, I thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Now, Chief, are we doing, we're still monitoring our federal Labor Standard Act limits on the amount of time owed people can accrue, because we're right on top of that, so we don't exceed the number of accumulated time owed.
Yeah, that's it's 480 hours. Right.
That's right. So, okay. And so we have a monitoring tracking system on that too?
Yes, payroll.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, I only have one more question, Mr. Chairman, and it's more presented to the mayor. So these raises are not unreasonable. I mean, we have inflation. Our patrol officers are not receiving an inordinate base salary, and from what I have heard, there is struggles with a number of officers who don't really want to work all these extra hours. Some do, and we're appreciative of that, and their name makes it into the top 100 list. Same with the superiors, but the base salaries themselves are not unreasonable based on my review compared to what I've seen in other communities. And these type of 2 to 3% increases. Having said all of that, I will ask the mayor, we only raised the levy $1 million this past year. And as you know, the good people of Holyoke are stretched to their max, and the taxes in this town are, again, among the highest for people's ability to pay, is among the very highest in Massachusetts. I just want to state that again, we have the highest residential tax burden, that is tax bill divided by income in the state of Massachusetts. That's something we all need to be very concerned about. And where we're only have a ability to raise about $1 million extra a year, and we're seeing the retirement board is now asking for an extra $350,000. So that's 33% of what we're increasing in taxes is going right to the retirement board to pay for the next 10 plus years, the added we need to do to fund our unfunded liability. We learned the other day we have a $310 million OPEB liability that we haven't even put $2 towards that yet. And here, this is an increase of $200,000 a year, $228,000. And then, you know, that'll be compounded with next year's increase and the year after that's increase. And so I'd love to hear from the mayor. Mayor, you just this police department raise in our retirement fund, that's half of an entire year's tax levy. And we've certainly had our other costs. You're obviously signed off on this and presenting it to us. You're telling us we can afford this?
Hey, counselors. Thanks so much, Kevin. So this budget year, and you know, I've been obviously we're in that time of the year, and we're starting to work on this. It's going to be I think I'm going to start becoming very unpopular with some decisions I'm going to have to make as far as how we put this budget together and get it balanced. The union, dealing with all the unions, actually, it's kind of been a bittersweet process because everybody wants an increase and don't necessarily, not necessarily sensitive to the very concerns you're raising. But nevertheless, as it currently presents itself, we can do it, except to your point, it's going to be tight, and there's going to be some very, very, very tough decisions and what we're going to be supporting coming into the new fiscal year. So, but hey, you know, it's give or take. It's one of those contracts that I wasn't overly thrilled with, but at the same time, considering, you know, how important it is to keep up with inflation as well as take care of the health of our officers as far as officers being held back and the chief having a challenging time with trying to keep up with coverage. You know, it's one of those where, you know, we both got something, and but certainly looking forward to the next contract negotiations, even considering everything that's came to the light with the recent audit that came out after we've already made proposals and whatnot. So we didn't want to go backwards. So, you know, right now I can say yes, but, you know, obviously it's going to be very tight as far as, you know, trying to keep up with other objectives that we're trying to achieve citywide in the budget. So we'll have to make some structural changes for sure to be sure that we're maintaining a balanced budget.
Thank you. Again, these are not unreasonable increases.
Counselor.
Kevin.
Sorry, the retirement that you mentioned. I did go to the retirement board meeting, and I did make it very clear that if I can't make it work, I won't be supporting the increase, considering all these things that I'm trying to balance within the budget. So just so you're aware, you know, I haven't yet fully supported one way or another until I get the anticipated revenue amount that I'm targeting for next year, and then I start putting the piece to the puzzle together. If I can support it, great. If I can't, I will not be supporting an increase for the retirement.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor. Really appreciate those insights. And we certainly look forward to working closely. It's not that far away. We'll be doing the budget. And, you know, again, I'm happy to support this. Lord only knows that our police do an amazing job and really so appreciate everything they do. And again, these are not unreasonable type rate increases. I know, when you see 6% inflation, plus that's out there and someone gets a 3% pay raise, you're actually still -3, and we have health costs. And I know that the city's doing everything we can, and hopefully there'll be some good news soon for the new budget on the health insurance work in light of a lot of the work the mayor and Rory and others are doing in that regard in HR. So happy to support this, but I will just tell folks, things are going to get tight, and we have some decisions that are going to be made here in some of these budgets, and it's going to be difficult and it's a challenge. So look forward to working with everybody on the Holyoke team here as we put all the pieces together. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Next part of the agenda is always the most important part of, not the agenda, but of this discussion here, is our auditor is here to answer the questions about the appropriation transfer. As we all know, our actual vote to ratify the contract is adopting the money necessary, as the mayor has requested, that would support the contract. Tanya, could you just walk us through the $125,000 transfer, why there's a surplus and sick buyback? But more important, is there already money in the budget in the patrolman's line item that is supporting this contract, or is the $125,000 the full amount for fiscal 23?
So I think the chief actually might be able to speak to the sick buyback line better than I can, but I can tell you with the $125,000, he can support the patrolmen that are in that line right now with the raises.
Okay. And Chief, on the sick buyback, why a surplus?
Basically it's just people that we thought would retire are now not retiring. So the money is there, and that's where I had the surplus. So
Understood. That has happened over the years.
yes, right.
Any further discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve items 3 and 4, Mr. Chairman.
We'll second that.
A motion has been made and seconded that we adopt the transfer of $125,000 into the patrolman's line item known as salaries, thus ratifying the contract which was just presented to us. If there's no further discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Tallman?
Yes.
Councilor Jordan?
Yes.
Councilor Powell?
Yes.
Councilor McGivern? Yes. And that is an adoption 401. Thank you. And Chief, we still have a couple more for you, but thank you, Russ. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Russ.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Don't forget to send the red line, Ross.
Red line
I
contract.
asked the law department to do so tomorrow.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Make a motion to take item number 5 off the table for discussion.
For discussion.
And 6?
Motion made and seconded that we take 5 and 6 together for discussion purposes. 5 will require separate votes. But on that motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 5 is introduced by Councilor Tallman, and it's the second or third time we've taken it up. It's an order that the chief, police chief, auditor, treasurer come before the finance committee to review the process of a newly hired, it's now off-duty blue, and try to find a process to find a procedure to pay down the current deficit in the duty-free account, which is, I think as we know, off-duty police officers are paid for jobs that they take from vendors in the private sector. The item 6, Councilor Vacan had filed 2 years ago, and I believe it's connected to this discussion. And Councilor Vacan, I found this with the help of the Wizard of Oz, and I said we got to get this on the agenda just to make sure that it has its fair. I think it's something that has been behind a lot of discussion on this particular line item, that request itself. But with that in mind, to the maker of item number 5, the maker of the order, Councilor Tallman, did you want to say anything first? We have our treasurer, chief here, and auditor here.
Yeah, we've made some progress on this item, and I've talked to the auditor earlier today, and I believe the treasurer has something to report to us tonight. Looking forward to hear from Rory Casey on this issue.
Thank you. And Rory, did you want to address this?
Sure. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Loud and clear.
Wonderful. I'm just having some connectivity issues. So thank you for giving us the time to do a thorough review. And after reviewing all the information and speaking with both the chief and with Tanya and the mayor, I think we have a good path forward. So what I'd like to do briefly is just explain what we looked at, and we really have to break this down into two different buckets. There's the time since we started working with a third-party vendor that's recently changed to a new vendor, but the process should remain the same. Since that time, with the reports that I've been given, I've been able to tie out the payroll that was dispersed to officers who worked these off-duty details, and as was mentioned, we're talking about folks working road details for the gas and electric or the waterworks. Maybe a landscaper hires them, maybe a contractor who has to open the road. Before, this was all handled internally. A while back, the city opted to contract with a third-party vendor who would handle all of the billing, the collections, and disbursement to the city directly for those officers who are employed by the police department. There's a second category of officers who are members of the former auxiliary who work these traffic details as well. They get paid directly. That money doesn't come through the city payroll. However, we do collect an administrative fee for both the regular employees and these auxiliary officers. So when I look at all the payroll and what's come in, it pretty much ties out, I can't say it ties out to the penny, but it's within, a couple $100 it ties out. So what that means is the deficit that exists is not a current deficit. It lives on our books, but this is something that when we actually look at this, and this is why I'm asking that we break this out into two buckets, that deficit has been on the books when you look at these accounts for more than 10 years. The folks, the people who had hired police to work these details, that for whatever reason the city wasn't made whole, those deficits and those vendors are so old we don't even have records on some of them. What we can tell you is that where we're at today, the process that we have in place is working, and it seems to be working relatively flawlessly. I know that, the chief can speak more to this, I think he brought it up at a previous meeting, there are some additional benefits to having this contracted vendor, insurances that they provide, and the way they process and do the collections. But really, what this has done is it's allowed the city to move forward without that deficit increasing. But the deficit itself still exists. The fees that we collect, the administrative fees, one of the reasons, and this is something that we looked at, one of the reasons that those fees, and we bring in, the fees are attached to the use or the actual payroll that goes out. So this fiscal year so far, we've brought in have it right here. We've brought in $60,671 in these fees. Because of the type of revenue that fee is, it doesn't go to directly offset any previous deficits. It's treated like normal departmental revenue. So the account that it goes into is the same account that we have other departmental revenue from the police department go into. So that's why there hasn't been a direct offset. The only way to move forward with this, and this is why we've talked about it with the mayor as well, and there'll have to be a future conversation and an appropriation made, will be to treat it like every other deficit that we've faced in these funds where it has an impact on free cash, where we actually are going to have to make a transfer at some point to cure that deficit. Once that happens, I think we all feel very comfortable with the process that currently exists to say that we're never going to fall back into that spot again. And I know that that's been brought up before. Oh, we've heard this before. The difference now is that we actually are working with a third-party vendor who it's within their best interest to make sure that that money's being collected because they're sending us that money. And that's part of our contract. So that's where we're at. That's what the analysis has come up with. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I'm sure Tanya, the chief, would be as well.
Ray, real quick, what is the dollar figure? What is the deficit prior to the third-party vendor? And when did the city start working with the first third-party vendor?
Give me a second here. The deficit itself that carries forward is, roughly $160,000. Once we close the fiscal year, that's when we'll have the true number with what that deficit is, because of the way the money flows in. If we were to look year to date today, let's say there was no past deficit. It was just, you just wanted to know where we're at today. It would look like there's a deficit because we pay the payroll and then there's a 2 to 4 week lag before we actually get that money back from the vendor. So I don't want to say it's a moving target where we don't know exactly, but to be able to tell you to the penny, we couldn't do that right now until fiscal 22 is finally closed out, which we're very close to having done. But when you look at Munis and you look at the account, the way it's carried from going all the way back to fiscal 2009, it's a roughly $160,000 that carries forward.
So the original third-party vendor started around fiscal 2009?
Oh, no. I'm sorry. I was talking about the deficit.
I'm sorry.
I believe that off-duty blue started in 2019. Excuse me, roll call started in fiscal 19. But I could be corrected on that. I wasn't working for the city at the time.
Thank you. Councilor Tallman, are you good for now?
Yeah. Just Rory, just another question. Because the main thing is to try to get this deficit down. So basically, this is so many years ago, and we don't have records for this. How do we get that paid off? Is that going to have to be like a transfer from that? The mayor's going to have to come forward to the council to get that paid off before so it doesn't show up every year and affect our free cash, or
correct,
or we don't do anything and every year we're going to get hit that $160,000.
Well, and Tanya can speak more to this, but I believe that at a certain point the state will tell us we have to cure it. But that is essentially the process, yes.
Right. And the money you said you collected this year, the $60,000, because of the way the funds come in, the revenue, it can't go paid towards that deficit. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. And I'm not suggesting that we create a revolving fund, but if you think of a revolving fund where both the expenses and the revenue exists within that fund, it would be different, but that isn't the way this is, that's not the way that this is organized. The revenue, those fees that come in, we receive two types of revenue. We receive the direct payments that we use that go directly against the payroll expenses. And then there's what it's called a jurisdiction fee, which is essentially a fee that the vendor assesses and pays us. That is considered just like towing, the fees that people, when they get their cars towed out for a parking ban, they have to go get the release.
Right.
They pay, whatever that is. It goes to a similar general revenue, general fund revenue account.
Okay. So if you could just make it clearer to everybody at home or to myself, if somebody does a road job for 4 hours, let's say, and let's say it's $120, the city will pay that officer $120, and then is it roll? It's off-duty blue now we're with.
It's off-duty blue, which is brand new. We haven't even seen that money coming in from them. We're still actually get the money from roll call, but that's correct. If it's $110, just throw that out as an example.
Right.
If it was $110 for the actual payroll, we'll get $125, and that other 15 is the jurisdiction fee that gets treated and gets booked as a separate type of revenue, general fund revenue.
Okay, and then out of that money, let's say it's a contractor, let's say it's a waterworks, they were billed by off-duty blue like $140 or something?
Correct.
And they get a portion of that. There's a split, right? The city gets a portion?
They do get a small portion of it, correct.
You know what that fee is, or that portion? Or does anybody, the chief? Yeah.
Other people might know the exact percentage. Based on the records the deposits that come in, it varies depending on the officer, the type of work, the number of hours. There's some different rates of pay, so it varies a little bit.
I believe what it is it's 10%, 5% to off-duty blue, 5% to the city. Is the administrative fee 10%?
Okay, Chief, was that similar to the one we had before with roll call, or?
Correct, exact same.
It was the same offset, 5 and 5?
Correct. The first vendor we had was a 10% fee all to the city, but we had to pay the vendor up front. And that was a little problematic, and it was, they didn't cover as many officers, and it was, for every officer we put on, we had to come up with more money up front, and that's why we moved away from that vendor to roll call, and now from roll call to off-duty blue.
Do you feel that off-duty blue is doing just as well as a job as roll call, or better?
Yes.
Okay, so, and who made the decision to bring them on? Was that you, or?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, myself in conjunction with the union.
With the union, okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have a few people online with their hands up in order of which I saw them. Councilor Bacon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the update from Rory. The order that I filed back in 2020 was out of frustration because we still had the deficit after we had implemented the third party. And so my goal was to try to stop the bleeding and the ever increasing deficit. So I'm very happy to hear that operationally we're not running in a deficit with these third party vendors that we contracted with after 2020. I guess the argument I would make is that if we've brought in estimating $60,000 for 3 years under the third party, once we implemented the administrative fees, we should write off the $160,000. I mean, it's a bad debt. So we're never getting it. It's sitting on the books and we need to clear it out. Having said that, I'm wondering with the current balances that we have, if we know this answer, do we have balances at this time over 180 days old in that off-duty account? Rory, if you know?
I don't know that I understand the exact question. What I can tell you is that the revenue that, when I look at this fiscal year specifically, from July until the end of March, it ties out to within $10. What we've expended through payroll and what we've taken in to offset that payroll expense. So there is no balance carrying forward. What does happen, and this is why, you know, I was saying it's hard to give a specific daily year to date.
Yeah, no, I understand the normal lag. Yeah.
Because there's a trailing, but what we've received. Okay, good.
Yeah, I understand that concept. I was just wondering, even if they're not in a bad debt category, if we have anything that's old.
No, and what's really nice about and we anticipate a similar relationship with Off-Duty Blue on our end, on the finance side. What's really nice about the reports that we've been provided thus far is if I wanted to, for example, say, Otter Smith had this payroll, and okay, where did that come from? Oh, they worked an 8-hour shift for gas and electric on March 5th. It actually shows me on 3 different reports exactly where that job came from, to which officer, and how it all breaks out. So we can do our own, triple check, but at this point, we've got the third-party vendor collecting. We have the police department's internal process, which then intersects with the process between payroll in the treasurer's office and the auditor's office.
Right. No,
So
that sounds great. I mean,
we won't get to that point again, where we were in the past.
Right, and that is very good to hear. So I thank you for that, and I'm glad we have a system that's working, because all of these examples that come up when there's 65,000, 75,000, 160,000, in the moment they don't sound like big money, but when you put them all together, it starts adding up to really serious money. So I'm glad that we've gotten our arms around this and that we have control. So thank you very much, and thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Counselor. I have Counselor Jordan and the mayor with their hands up. I'm going to recognize Counselor Jordan first as a member of the committee, Mayor, if that's okay. Counselor Jordan.
Hey, how about that? I rank above the mayor. God bless him.
Don't let it go to your head.
At least for a moment, I can pretend, at least. So anyways, I wanted to just ask a couple things, especially if we're going to be having a transfer coming. I think it would be wise for the Finance Committee to have documentation on an annual summary would be really appreciated. So if say we're dating back to fiscal 2009, or as far back as you can put this data together, if we could have the revenue in one column, be it the fees and the regular appropriation, and then have another column showing all the expenses for that particular fiscal year. And then finally, show us if there's a deficit in the final column so that we could compare, really the years that these generated these deficits, as best as you can put that together. And if I was listening carefully, I understand that you don't, since 2019 at least, you do not have any deficits whatsoever, that we're collecting 100% of our billables.
I think within $200.
Within $200. Well, that's pretty good. Okay, excellent. So yeah, if we could just get that report, I think that would be good for us to see. I also would like to understand how much money is flowing through this year by year. and I'd like to also know, is it trending up or trending down? And then the other question I wanted to ask is, I think pretty related, and that is, how are we evaluating the rate that we're charging? Obviously, we're giving out pay increases this evening, cost of inflation and such. I want to make sure that we're collecting a high enough rate. So what's our bill rate compared to what our payment rate is?
Chief, is it still a standard rate?
Yeah, the rate is set. It's a pretty standard rate. It's pretty close across the board or surrounding communities. They're all in the, let's just say, low end 50, high end maybe $60 an hour, and then the 10% fee is pretty standard amongst most departments. I don't know if someone has a little higher fee, but I think this 10% is pretty standard.
Keith, is that regulated? Is there, or are we allowed to set what we want as a rate?
The fee or
Yes,
the
sir.
rate?
The rate that we're billing this out at, do we have the authority, say we wanted to make the rate $70, okay? Do we have the authority to do that?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so I guess I want to really make sure we understand, our rate is what now, 50 you said, or 60?
I haven't worked a road job in a long time. I think it's 52, 53 an hour.
Okay, and that's
Yeah,
what
Chief's right. It's about 50. 52 seems to be the average based on all the data I've seen.
Okay, so 52, and that's what, so let me just make sure I understand this. When an officer works one of these jobs, they agree to be paid $52 an hour. So say they were already making $40 an hour, and their time and a half rate, if they were on overtime, would have been $60. They agree to be paid less than their regular overtime rate. They agreed to accept the $52.
That's correct. It's actually set by the patrolman. The rate is set by the patrolman union.
Well, what if it's, but everybody, whether it's a superior or theoretically, I suppose,
All the same, yeah. Superior officers, the same thing. Same rate.
So everybody agrees, regardless of whether that's time and a half or not, that's a fixed rate that they agree to.
Well, I should say that some of the jobs pay more if they serve alcohol. It's a little more. If it's on, there are jobs that are like time and a half or possibly double time, depending on like holidays and things like that. So there are higher billing jobs on occasion, but they're not the normal jobs are 52 an hour.
Could you email us the rate chart? And when you say the union sets, that seems odd to me that the workers set what these rates would be. Why isn't that coming from, I don't know, the mayor's office or the treasurer, or calculating based on what we need to be paid to cover our costs? Why isn't it coming maybe from you as the chief? Why do we allow the workers to set the rates that we charge for jobs?
Attorney Bissonnette would like to answer that.
Okay.
It's a state statute that requires the 10% be the maximum. It's under, you see here, Section 53C, which sets up the deposit and expenditure of compensation for off-duty or special detail work. And in that statute, it authorizes cities to set a fee no more than 10% of what is charged for the services. So I think that's where that generated, and every police department has made sure that that's found its way into contracts.
So,
Hope that answers the question.
maybe. Michael, you're referring to that 10% administrative fee, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
I'm not quibbling with the 10% part. That makes sense to me. Thank you for sharing that, though. That's helpful. But what I'm talking about is
Certainly.
the actual rate we're charging. So the $52 to $53. I'm just wondering, and the other thing is, I guess I was just trying to understand that, but I guess if it's strictly a pass-through to the workers, I just want to make sure there's no gap there that we're ever filling, right? There's no scenario where we'd be billing out 52 and somebody would get paid 75, correct? Chief?
I'm a little confused. I don't understand the question.
Okay, so the answer is that what I've learned is that the unions apparently are setting the rate that we're billing out at, is $52, $53.
Right.
I guess I'm just wondering, why do they have that authority, by the way?
Just contractual.
Wow, so we agreed to allow the workers to set their own.
I mean, as long as I've been here, that's been the way.
Interesting. Okay. Now, there's no scenario, just so I want to be real crystal clear so I'm understanding this very thoroughly. There's no scenario where we would bill 52, 53 and somebody would be getting paid a rate higher than that.
No, if they were paid a higher rate due to whether there's alcohol involved or a cruiser, if we use a cruiser, they bill more for that as well. Then they get billed that. That's what they get billed.
Okay, so if we use a cruiser or something like that, how does that, how does the worker get more money? So let's say, use your example of we use a cruiser. Now that's our equipment, right?
I think a better example is like a detail that serves alcohol. So if you were having like a concert and you were going to serve alcohol at that concert, the rate is higher. I don't know the exact rate number, but I know that they get paid. The individual officer gets more money to work that detail because there's, obviously with the alcohol, there's more, it's a, for lack of a better word, it's harder work. Potentially, it's,
Potentially, sure. Because they might be dealing potentially, I guess, with inebriated customers or something, or a large crowd.
Correct.
Some risk factors there. That makes sense. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that there's no delta there between the amount we're billing and the amount the officer's getting paid, so that we're picking up, no city funds are coming up in this, that this is really 100% self-sufficient. And the other thing I want to make sure
and that's also monitored by, like if the job goes out, it goes out under that rate through roll call. So that they're also tracking that as well. So it's not like, we're just going to add $10 for an hour and we're responsible for that. That all still goes through roll call the way it normally does. They just list the job differently on their app that goes out to the officers. And then that's tracked the same way through the city as the regular rate job.
So let me ask you a situation, just to educate me on this. Say one of our officers goes and does this private job, effectively was what they are, and we're sort of the conduit. Say they're working the concert and some drunk, crazy person comes up and slugs one of our officers, God forbid, and he gets hurt or she gets hurt. And who pays for all the residual cost, now that this person's out of work? Do we bill that back to the person? Are they required to have insurance? Like on these road jobs, or got some idiot drives through a set of cones and crashes into our officer? while they're working these private jobs? Like, who's on the risk and liability for all of that?
For our regular officers, you know, they would be covered under the city. The auxiliary traffic officers would be covered. They have a insurance that they purchase through Off-Duty Blue. That's required that they purchase it.
So I guess I'm going to ask management, between you, chief, and the treasurer, do we ever have conversations with Off-Duty Blue that covers that there's required to have a certain portion or build into the $52, instead it should be $62, and we're getting a liability policy that, you know, our officers are covered under? Because I could see very easily someone working these private jobs gets injured, and now we're on the hook for that, and now we could be paying. And the road job people, they say, well, that's your problem. I gave you my $52. Have a nice day. But now I have an injured officer who can't work for a year because he got hit at a road job or got hit working one of their concerts. What's managed? Rory, do you have any thoughts about how could we get a policy to cover us for these road jobs and these extra private duty work, so that the city is protected? Like, instead of charging 52, maybe we should be charging 75, and we can pay a premium for an independent insurance policy to protect the city. And I guess from there I would ask, has any employees, have we ever been injured working private duty work?
I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but I could certainly look into it. I think, you know, there's a fine line there too. It could change in the middle of the job. An officer could be on a road job and take action, which really, you know, I guess it would depend how they got hurt. You know, we would have to look at that as well. You know, did they leave the road job for you know, something that was happening? Or did they get, like you said, hit by a car at the road job? So
right.
There's, you know, did they leave the road job to sort of perform police duties and then get hurt? Or did they get hurt at the road job by a car? I think traditionally, if I'm just hazarding a guess here, without knowing 100%, they're covered by the department either way. But I hear what you're saying, and we can certainly look into that through Off-Duty Blue. I mean, they do have the policy for the auxiliary traffic officers, so I don't know if they have it for full-time officers or not.
See, I think, Chief, yes, obviously, if somebody gets pulled off and there's a bank robbery, you say, you know, all officers, you know, head down and help. You know, that now they're not doing what the person paid for. But I think the city is taking on a liability that, I guess why I'm raising this issue is, I'm raising these questions for you to consider. The total cost likely exceeds just the payment of salary as we are calculating these rates. And yet, as we put these workers of ours out into the community at these private jobs, we are exposing the city to costs and liability risk. And we're not accounting for that financially. And I think we need to seriously consider how we handle that. And maybe the answer is we get a policy to protect them like we do for the auxiliaries, because I don't want to send somebody out on a $52 road job, and then it turns out we're paying $100,000 for their salary for the next year if they get injured. That's not a good deal for Hoyoke taxpayers. I think everyone would agree. So we need to be making sure these rates reflect our true cost. And so I would ask management, between the mayor and yourself and the treasurer, consider this question and see if, you know, it wouldn't cost maybe the worker or anything. You know, maybe we can get a policy and build it into the rate. Something to think about. So I've talked long enough. I wanted to put that out there, but thank you for your time.
Okay.
Thank you. And if I could recognize Mayor Garcia.
Thank you, Chairman. And just for the record, everybody, in my mind and in my perspective, you are all always much more important than I'll ever be. So just know that. So I did wanted to talk about the deficit and just share kind of my thoughts on what we're doing. But before I get into that, though, some of the points that Councilor Jourdain was just making, all really good ones. I just had some clarifying questions for the chief. Hey, Chief, or Rory, we do have, are we getting any payment toward the city for admin or overhead costs when we have officers work these details?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
We received, like this fiscal year, for example, I mentioned we received $60,000.
Okay, so and I'm assuming, what is it per detail do we charge for overhead?
I believe what the chief had mentioned was it's about 5%.
And is that what Attorney Bissonnette was just explaining? We can do up to 10%, or did I?
Well, I think
Am I
we could
interpreting
charge.
that wrong?
It's 10%, but half of it goes to the vendor, Mayor, and half comes. So we're at the 10%.
Oh, so
like,
we're at the 10%.
Yeah, for example, the city, if we were doing this in-house, and I'm not at all suggesting we should, because that would bring us back to some of the things that had happened in the, past, very long ago. We could charge 10% under state law.
So I guess I was
there's
just
10% being charged, we get 5%, and the vendor gets 5%.
as we prepare and plan ahead, if we, and we can talk about this more later,
Yeah.
but we should take into consideration the amount of time the treasurer's office and whatever office is involved, the auditor, some sort of formula that helps outline what we're charging on the city end to cover that cost, that admin cost. And then also for the chief, working with members of the department, and maybe your hands are tied because you've hit the 10% mark, whatever the appropriate rate is to be sure that we're keeping up with the hourly dollar amount for an officer to work, period. We should be reflecting that appropriate amount. But, we could talk about that and plan ahead for that stuff later. And then also, a lot of that money that these officers are collecting from working these details, when people see what officers are getting, like annual set, that's contributing to that dollar amount. So if an officer is making on the record $130,000 for the year, it's not that the city raised and appropriated to pay $130,000 for an officer. It's because they took up that detail work, and those companies are paying for that. But going back to the deficit, I remember around this time last year when I think it was the time when we were reviewing the FY20 audit, we were talking about this very same issue with the deficit, and I had mentioned, obviously, like, I wanted to hold off from transferring anything until, one, we know what it's about, and two, that there's some sort of system in place to be sure that if we're going to clear this and move forward, that we don't go backwards. And here we are today, as presented, that there is a system in place, and then also making sure during year-end process that all these line items, all these deficit balances are cleared, and at a, where it should be at the zero balance, at a balanced. And a lot of those old deficits, there so many contributing factors, from whether if it's a vendor that never paid and they're no longer existed, or also I do think that some of them are mispostings. We've came across some situations where, we find out when we select a reimbursement to balance a line item, let's say it's a grant or whatever the case, that it was paid, but it was still showing as a deficit there, and just later to find out that it was a misposting from previous times. So I think what I certainly want to do, and we talked about this at our last monthly finance meeting, we were going to the FY21 audit report, that highlighted this as a material weakness for that fiscal years. Obviously, from that moment to date, the auditor and a lot of people did a lot of work. But to be sure that, you know, if there's already a system in place that's allowing us to keep up with making sure that's not at a deficit, great. And with that being said, you know, you will be presented soon, if not already, strategies to start transferring over money so we can cure this deficit and move forward. Whatever the balance is now, if there is a balance, Mr. Treasurer, you said it was about 160,000 deficit at the moment, or?
Right.
We'll have the final number once Markham's done with their
And you close
out for fiscal 22.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we will be certainly presenting a strategy, a funding strategy, so that we can clear that and put it behind us, knowing that there's a system currently in place that keeps up with it and doesn't allow us to go backwards. And then also have it should be reflected in our financial policies management manual, which I'm told I should have a draft soon, so it's coming. That, you know, remember, we're going to work together and do some last minute changes and then get it codified, among other steps we're trying to take to, you know, keep up with, maintain continuity and making sure that we don't go backwards. So I just wanted to share those points.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Tomlin.
Yeah, I'm very satisfied with what's been done tonight in the talk. Thank you, Rory and the mayor, especially the auditor, chief, to bring this forward to trying to pay down that deficit. And I'm very confident that the system in place will do what the job it's supposed to do, and also that if we have to, as the mayor said, to cure this deficit doesn't keep on showing up to take away from our free cash, and looking forward to trying to get this cleared off the books, although some of these things go back probably 12, 13, 15 years. So whatever reason it was, I mean, I'd like to see the report of the years that was actually owed onto this account. But I am satisfied with this, and very happy to say that, I don't know what Councilor Bacon's order, but I'm happy to say that with the discussion we've had the last 3 meetings, that item 5 has been complied with.
Thank you, Councilor. Just a quick question. Rory, the money that came in this fiscal year, the $60,671, that was this fiscal year. Can we get the number on the fees that were collected in prior fiscal years since we implemented the 10%? And as the chief said, I think originally it was a flat fee. Not tonight, but just so we can get it.
Absolutely.
I think I think the chief knows this, I think he said it in the past, that if you look at all the fees that have been collected over the past 4.5 years, we've really pretty much offset the deficit. We just haven't appropriated the money from what my sheriff over in the corner would say, an accounting, appropriate accounting move to offset the deficit. But I won't get into those arguments with DLS anymore, because they remember you when you get into arguments with them. Yeah. I'd just like to say thank you, as Councilor Talmadge did, real quick. This is good news and good news. Good news, the system's in place, the third-party vendor is working. Great news on balancing it. I want to thank, and the good news on the fact that, you know, with the monies that have been collected, the fees been collected, we've been actually offsetting in our own way the deficit itself, but we got a light at the end of the tunnel. I commend our treasurer, Rory Casey. I commend Chief Pratt. And although I don't know if she's online with us, I commend Katie McCoy, because there's no doubt Katie and the auditor had a lot to do with this too. Am I right, Tanya? Absolutely. If it's police department budget, we know Katie, and payroll, Katie's always in the middle of it, and we appreciate that over many years. But thank you all. Good job. A couple more hands up. Councilor Jordan?
Yeah, just a couple of points. I wanted to mention that my suggestion about the liability insurance, I think this would not be administrative. The 5% administrative fee we are getting, That's really designed to cover the auditor work, or processing of all of this. We obviously have to get the money, give it into payroll. That's what the admin fee is for. What I think we might want to consider is maybe what we could do is if we could determine what the cost is of those type of policies, we could break that down as a hourly cost. And then what we could do is increase the fee by that amount, and then you charge the officers for the policy, and then you increase the amount that they're paid so that they're made whole and they get the coverage and it protects the city. So I think we should seriously consider that to do, and then that would not be held to any of the 5% administrative. The other thing I was curious is I'm really intrigued that if this debt is this old and has been this uncollected for this long, how did and I don't need an answer to it, but I'm intrigued that the Department of Revenue has not held us account for that. What have we been telling these people?
Yeah, well, I remember you sending me his picture, and he's not that good looking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Someone's commenting on my good looks. Anyways, I wanted to ask though, I'll be interested to see how it is that we're going to now report it, that 10 years later, we finally determined that, we're not going to get the money. But the other thing I would appreciate though is whenever that transfer does come forward for the 160,000, I would like to be provided a list of the people who didn't pay, these companies that did not pay, and how much each one of them didn't pay. I'm assuming we've done whatever we can for collection. Maybe some of them are out of business, but obviously we should have a list of those folks so that they're never allowed to do business with the city again. Situation they pay, so that there is some level of accountability that they won't burn us again in the future. So thank you for hearing those points.
Councilor Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say that I'm happy to find my order complied with, and that 3 years later we're operating in the black with this particular fund. That is very good news, and so let's keep up the good work, and thanks to all involved for making it happen.
Thank you, and then I appreciate your patience. With that in mind, the motion on the floor is that both these orders are complied with. Mayor, did you have something else to say, or is that your hand still up?
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, so I think I'm going to look into this, Counselor. I believe we have police and fire insurance for these situations. If I'm not mistaken, maybe the auditor can correct me. There's a line item where we acquire police and fire insurance to cover those liabilities if they would occur. And then if that is the case, it's making sure that whatever our admin fee includes the cost for that. Putting the costs on the officer, I mean, they are providing a service, even though it's private detail. It's they're not just doing private detail work for anybody. This is public safety measures in the community that we expect them to do. And so I wouldn't necessarily borne any cost on the officer to pay the city, but to be sure that whatever we're charging with that admin fee, that we're capturing any costs associated with that officer's participation in a private detail, if that makes sense. So, yes, the treasurer, the auditor, and all those costs, the time in that, but also the cost for that insurance that Councilor Jordan was just talking about, which I think we do have. But if we don't, we can certainly, this was a very good discussion that certainly has opened up my mind a little bit. And you've carved the path here, Councilor, I want to look more into, but I believe one way or another, the city is protected.
Yeah, if I might, thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, could I just make one point?
Councilor Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate that as always. What I was suggesting about is not that the officer would bear the cost. What I'm saying is we would increase their pay rate so that they would be made whole. So say, for example, the insurance costs $2 an hour. We would increase the rate from 52 to 54 so that they would be made whole. If we couldn't have the admin cover, my fear is that if we can only collect a 5% administrative fee, and that's capped by statute, because we have to give half of it to our vendor, that only allows us on $50 is what, $2.50? I mean, that's not too, I don't know what you're gonna really buy for $2.50 an hour that the treasurer's office and the auditor and the payroll and all these other, they're gobbling up probably that $2.50 very quickly. The only way you would be able to get around it and use it through admin only would be if you jacked up the rate maybe to another $10 or $20 maybe. But what I'm suggesting is, how do we cover that in the rate itself, if that's possible, you know? Because then it becomes a deduction just like health insurance or other type of insurance, but we're making the officers whole. But at the same time, by them getting that policy, it's covering the city too and covering them. So I don't know, just something to think about, and we can be creative so that everybody is a win-win.
Just, I'll put the last comment in and we got to move this on. I know the license board, when they issue those one-day special event liquor licenses, the applicant is required to take out a liquor liability policy. And the city is named on that policy along with whoever the host of the event might be, the owner of the building. It's just, I don't know for a fact, but I think that might play into what we're talking about or might be part of what we're talking about. Anyways.
Motion, items number 5 and 6 are complied with.
Second.
Motion made second. Items 5 and 6 have been complied with. All those, roll call. Councilor Dahlman?
Yes.
Councilor Jordan?
Yes.
Councilor Powell?
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. 401. And again, thank you, everybody, for a very healthy
Great
and
discussion.
productive conversation.
Thank you.
Motion to take item number 7 off the table for discussion.
Second.
Motion made second to take item 7 off the table for discussion. This is E911 dispatchers, $125,000 into overtime. On that motion to take off the table, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. With this, Chief Pratt, are you gonna, I think this is the annual grant transfer?
Correct.
Could you just, for anybody listening and for us, could you just walk us through it?
Okay, so this is this is from the E911 dispatchers, the PSAP grant. It's refundable grant that comes in usually for overtime and equipment. This is a transfer to the overtime line item to get us through the rest of the year.
And this grant works as a reimbursement grant. As you pay a dispatcher, you're allowed to to cash in on the grant.
That's correct. Yeah.
And can you just walk us through overtime, how you're doing? Is this the final transfer for the year?
Well, I hope it is. You know, I never say never, but I think currently we're on pace. Like I said, in the next few weeks, we're going to have some more officers added to our mix, which should help the number. You know, I think I forgot to grab the average, but I think we're averaging right around 40 a pay period, but this last pay period was 38. So that was a little encouraging. And this will hopefully be the last transfer for the year. And I think that 125 will get us there. We're certainly going to try.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions or discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer.
Motion made and second to approve the transfer. Seeing no further discussion, roll call. Councilor Tallman?
Yes.
Counselor Jordan?
Yes.
Counselor Pueblo?
Yes.
Counselor McGivern, yes. 401, that recommendation will go to the city council next Tuesday.
Motion to take item number 8 off the table for discussion.
Second.
This is a request of transfer for this fiscal year. The total is $33,000. I'm going to read it real quick. Coming from part-time police principal clerks, $18,000. Elections, $2,652. Snow removal, $7,348. Education plan, $5,000, which totals to $33,000, all in the police department budget. Going to reserves, $10,000. Police principal clerks, $6,775. Bookkeeper, $1,225. Special events, $10,000. Training, $2,000. And incentive, $3,000, totaling to $33,000. This is, we're getting near the end of the fiscal year, and on the request for appropriation transfer, it's been identified as to balance these items before our fiscal year ends. So with us this evening, we have Chief Pratt, we have the auditor, and of course, we have the mayor, just to answer any questions to the balancing of these line items. Chief, did you want to say anything?
Sure, I can walk you through it quick. It's sort of broken down in the order. The 18,000 from, that's part-time clerks, which we currently don't have any. That line item is going to be used to offset the raises of the clerks, the full-time clerks, and the bookkeeper, as well as add money to the reserves, which, you know, ultimately the reserves hopefully will help with overtime costs. The elections and snow removal, we had well, I don't want to say a good year, but not a big year of snow removal details. And so that money in the election, extra money over to special events. We still have a few special events to come, with the fireworks obviously being the biggest. And there's a couple others that are headed our way in June. So that'll just cover the overtime for those events. And then the last 5,000 from the education plan over to training incentive is also contractual to cover those deficits. But there was enough money in education, it just needed to be shifted to the training and the incentive line items.
Thank you. Any discussion or any questions? Councilor Tomlin.
Yeah, Chief, on that first line item, the part-time police principal clerks, is there a reason why you don't have any of those?
Well, traditionally, we would use them to backfill our full-time, but we're actually short of full-time. And so we've hired our part-timers if they were here or they had wanted left. So they were, when we went to the newer system with them being essential workers, we went to more full-time and less part-time. I think we had a discussion on that one day where it was kind of a wash, but better overall for the city and running the department. And that currently we just don't have the part-time clerks. I mean, if we're in the process of hiring full-time clerks, we're down to 2 full-time clerks. So we have to fill those first, and then, you know, where we usually bring in the part-timers is after we have the full-time staff full. Then the part-timers, if we can get them, it's a tough position to keep. Sometimes you have to find just the right person who's not interested in, say, full-time work, but will want to work it. But most times, once they come to work here, a lot of our part-timers will then take the full-time jobs as they open up. So they do help us when we have them, but currently we just don't have them. We're focused on filling the full-time slots right now.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, good answer. Any other questions or discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer.
Second.
Motion made and seconded that we approve and adopt the transfer. I recommend that to the full city council. If there's no further discussion, seeing none, roll call. Councilor Tomlin?
Yes.
Councilor Jordan?
Yes.
Councilor Pueblo?
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. Passes 401. Recommendation will go to the full city council next week. One more.
Motion to take item number 9 off the table for discussion.
Motion made, second to take item number 9 off the table for discussion. This was a copy of an order that was handled in DGR. It's under Councilor Jordan that a Representative Duffy, Senator Vilas, or their representatives be invited to the City Council to discuss specific legislative bills and file on behalf to increase our local aid funding formulas affecting the city. They are requested to provide a summary and list all state financial formulas affecting Holyoke, how the current aid is calculated, populations, example, population size, number of students, miles, public roads, and all that, so that we can fully understand what is really driving our local aid and what we need to change to get more aid. The current local aid model is unsustainable, and Massachusetts needs to help Holyoke far more than it is currently. Councilors will also be provided them with the number of suggestions for specific changes we discuss. Kevin, I haven't talked to you, but we did put this on the agenda after hearing an incredibly lengthy and healthy conversation in DGR with our State Rep Duffy and our Senator Vilas, and I just wanted to see if you think this has been complied with.
I do, Mr. Chairman. The only thing I'll say is a couple of points. One is that Representative Duffy and Senator Vilas have been very helpful, as have been the mayor, in terms of making this issue. I think we've broken through to really make the point that this has got to be a top priority for us. I'm very encouraged, particularly with the support of Representative Duffy and really lobbying with the Gateway City Caucus on our behalf. I'm very encouraged that we can get other communities that are similarly situated to us, that are gateway cities, that share our same similar dynamic here. But I think we're on the road to a strong, hopefully, making of our case. I'm very concerned again about what is projected to become our unrestricted local aid. We've gotten nice increases in the schools, but we have not on the general fund side. And that appears to be the direction we're going again for the next state budget. I hope that there's a breakthrough there. I do think that the council and the city government generally needs to become very educated about these formulas on some of this local aid. But I feel the right people, they get it and they see where we're going. So I feel comfortable that this is complied with. I will continue myself personally to work with these leaders. And I will certainly reach out to my colleagues on the council. If we need to make a lobbying effort at different touch points, this is the game changer we need for Holyoke on the general fund side. We've got serious liabilities and needs, capital needs that need to be met, and we need them to help us. They're uniquely positioned to help us. The state is sitting on more money than it's ever sat in, and we're, billions and billions. And we're over here trying to hold body and soul together. So I really look forward to changing this, because this is so important to our future as a community.
Counselor, I could not agree with you anymore. There was a great conversation in DGR, and I do agree. I think they got the message and understand where we're coming from. And I think both Rep. Duffy and Senator Vilas are working on our behalf in those areas. Less than a handful of us can remember that before Chapter 70, state aid was pretty much schools, police, fire, DPW, and so on. And we also got federal revenue sharing dollars through the state, which we could put into those general items. And it helped balance our budget a lot easier than today. I'm not knocking what the state does for education. I think it's tremendous. But as a gateway community, we could use a lot more help in other areas, and I think that message is out there. And hopefully, there's been some movement, but hopefully there'll be some more significant movement in the near future. Councilor Tomlin?
Yeah, I just want to say that thanks to Councilor Jordan, and I believe I added my name onto this when he filed this. I had a chance to to watch that meeting. It was a very robust meeting last month with the DGR committee, and we have great representatives down at the State House. And I watched as Councilor Jourdain asked several questions on how we can improve, our fiscal standing and our financial standing in this community, and getting with other gateway communities, I believe, is the way to go. And we just have to continue working with our state rep and our state senator in the future months to see if we can get our fair share in our community.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, the motion on the floor is that this is complied with. Roll call, Councilor Tomlin?
Yes.
Councilor Jourdain?
Yes.
Councilor Powell?
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. Passes 4-0-1. I know the motion I want to hear.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
Motion made and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Good meeting.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Thanks, guys. Good night.
Have a good night.
Good night.